Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Letter of Law Interviews. My name is Sarthak Bharadwaj, and in the 14th episode of this interview series, I'm absolutely honored, thrilled, and delighted to be in conversation with none other than Mr. Sarosh Zaiwalla. Now, Sir obviously doesn't require any introduction. He's, of course, the founder of Zaiwalla Co. He's the first non European to set up an English solicitors firm in London. Over his long and illustrious career, Sir has worked with the likes of the Gandhis, Bollywood superstars, the Bachchans, the Dalai Lama. He has represented governments, including, of course, the government of India, government of China, and so on. And very recently, Sir's memoirs, Honor Bound, were released, which I read and I was greatly inspired by it. Sir's heartfelt honesty in the book was truly, truly inspiring. And today I'm so happy, sir, that I have an opportunity to sit here and interview you. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being here with me.
Sarthak, thank you very much for calling me. First of all, I must thank you for inviting me. And secondly, I must say that I wrote my memoir not as a vanity book, but for two reasons. One is an inspiration for the other young people that they can achieve they can achieve great heights if they really want to and go about the right way. And second reason why I wrote my book is a historical record of what London was when I started and how it has changed and how diversity has come about. And that is very important because when I first came down, I remember walking in the streets was quite frightening because there was all this Paki bashers and all that thing around who didn't want immigration.
Right.
Thank you for inviting me, and please ask me any questions that you ask. And I'll answer it as honestly as possible.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. So, sir, my first question to you is that in your book, you had written that you wanted to be the prime minister and make India great again. So, what changed, and how did you decide to pursue
That
law?
is true. When I was a kid, I was at 5 or 6 years. I used to read Times of India every morning when I woke up. And believe it or not, I got fascinated by politics. I was following politics. And I've always wanted a desire to change the world and change things and not keep it constant. It's a natural instinct. And I remember going for a political rally when I was 7 or 8, Chapati, and I was staying in Hughes Road. The next door to my house was Bharati Vidya Bhavan. And I remember I went for a Swatantra Party meeting just out of interest to see what they stood for. And I saw Raja Gopalachari with a great sense of humor. I was a young kid. Everybody was surprised to see a young kid in the meeting. But it was a natural, I wanted to join politics. If I'd come back to India, I would have joined politics. I don't know whether it's a good or bad. Now, when I look how the politics have changed, I think it's better that I remain in the legal profession.
So
That's the honest answer.
Right, right. Thank you for that, sir. So moving on, you attended law school at the Government Law College, Mumbai, and there you were actively involved in student politics. So I'd like you to take us back to that time and share your experiences of studying law at GLC.
Well, I was always a political activist. At least naturally, it came to me, and I organized the first strike in the HR College of Commerce because the principal was quite dictatorial. There were consequences for me. I've said in my book. And the government law college, we had a man principal called T.K. Tope, a wonderful man, as I got to know him later. But he was also considered a dictator. People were very frightened of him. So I assisted in forming the students' union. I was elected as the general secretary of the students' union, which is a dormant body, and I activated it. And there were issues. I remember Principal Tope calling me and said, I will not tolerate this. Either you go or I go. And he showed me his barrister's gown because he was a lawyer. And I said, I won't go. But then we became such good friends because there was honesty on both sides. And in fact, as I said in my book, that when I came to London, it was because of him that I got into the International Students' House. He wrote to the Secretary General. By that time, he was the Vice Chancellor of the Bombay University, Tope. And he had become a great friend. We had become a very great mutual friend. And so I was always very active. Wonderful. I also started the first students' union canteen in Government Law College.
Oh, wow.
The organization was part of the skills one has to exercise.
That's wonderful.
But it was fun. It was very fun.
I can imagine that. And I mean,
the most important event I can remember is that as my general secretary, I started a weekly program or some daily program. There was general election and what my party stands for. And I called the leaders of the political party. And the response I got was so good. George Fernandez came Monday. I think I met Nijlingappa, I met lots of people. It was great, great fun.
And so how did you decide to then move to England, and what made you not practice here in India?
Well, I tell you, my father was an English solicitor, because in those days, students used to go to England for bar, but for some reason he had become a solicitor in England, and he was the youngest in his family. He came from one of the zamindar families in Dahanu, Kolwood, which is in Maharashtra, and he was the youngest in his family. I was the youngest son in my family. So I decided to qualify as a solicitor in London and come back. That was my intention: come back and join politics.
Right. So
So
while
when I qualified, I passed my solicitor's exams in London. Then I had to come back for a work permit for 3 months. Then I got married to a Hindu girl, and that was not permissible in those days. So I decided that it was very strict in those days. A Parsi could not marry a non-Parsi girl, and the legal profession in those days was dominated by Parsis and Gujaratis, and in Bombay. So I decided to go back for some time. And anyway, I had to go for 2 years for training contract.
Yeah.
After I passed the exams, and then I stayed back. Then I started my own firm. I saw the opportunity. I started my own firm, and as explained in my book.
Right. So, and I mean, this is a nice segue into the other question I have. When you were undergoing your training in England, did you always imagine that you will end up setting up your law firm, or were your plans at that time different?
Not in the beginning. In the beginning, I was still interested in getting back into India and joining politics. And with me as a student in a bar was Maraspan Patrawala, and we were colleagues at the government law college. And the third one was Firoz Talia Khan. We were all very politically active, 3 Parsis in government law college. We happened to be there. Firoz Talia Khan's father was Homi Talia Khan, who was a minister in the Maharashtra government. Maraspan went on to become a minister in Maharashtra government, but then he unfortunately died away. The stress was too much for him. He passed away. So yes, that's it.
Right. So after qualifying as a lawyer in England and undergoing your training, you of course set up your own firm. Now, I assume this wasn't an easy choice, because it would have been a lot easier to join a firm or some lawyers' chambers, but you went and took the hard road and established your law firm. So how was that experience like?
Well, I tell you, because I saw that there were very few lawyers. There were only about 4 or 5 Indian barristers settled in England, and there were 4 or 5 Indian students and all that thing. And I found that they were not doing at all well. They were sort of a ghetto chambers, and only they did immigrations and a few criminal matters and all that thing. There were 3 Queen's Counsel. One was a Parsi called Kambata, but he had no practice after the Privy Council was abolished. Then there was Pritam Singh and Mota Singh, who became a district judge in the end, much later. And I recognized that I had no chance at all, because there were few Asian law firms, but they were in the ghetto areas doing immigration, crime, and just magistral work. But there was nobody in the city. So I decided I must start a firm. If I were to start, I would start in this 1 square mile business and financial district of City of London, where the cream of the work is there. It was difficult, but it was not impossible. In fact, they were all bemused to see me, so they were quite supportive too, many of them. A new face on the rack.
Indeed. And then, sir, in your book, you have written that back in the day, England, unlike America, is a country of natives, whereas America is a country of immigrants. So what were the kind of initial challenges you faced when you started out as an Indian law firm? You chose not to anglicize yourself. So how was that like?
I decided that I'm going to keep my Indian, because if I anglicize, I would become a secondary person, accepting that my Indianness was not good enough. And therefore, even the few law firms which were in the backward area of London, they had all English first name, not the real name. Somebody would call them Thompson something or the other and all the thing. So I decided to do it on my own. The challenges were there, but there was also a lot of interest, because I think, let me first explain to you what I meant by the Britain is not a country of natives, because America is a country of natives started by the immigrants. But Britain had ruled the empire in India for 300 years. And therefore, I found it in the upper class, the ruling class, there were only two classes of Indian or colored people. They were either the princely class, who were like them, who would say yes and drink and just be subservient to them, but pretend to be equal to them. And the other was what was termed as a coolie class. That is how we were affectionately or not affectionately known as the coolie class. And the coolie class was treated with disdain. Okay, talk to them as necessary, but they were in the labor and all the thing. And therefore, I recognized that that needed to be changed. And you have to recognize that that can't happen immediately, because a country which has been governing two-thirds or two-fifths of the world, suddenly you find that Indians coming and taking charge. It's not easy for them to accept. So therefore, you have to do it gently and follow their method and courtesy and the English way of life. That was very important to make them comfortable.
I understand, sir. So do you think this is changing now, and now the English people are more welcoming of foreigners?
It has changed enormously. In the last 15 years, it has changed. The judiciary has changed, and in one of my chapters, I discuss how it has changed. And I had to take a stand, not for my own benefit, but because the P&I club, who had told my firm that, my boys, we don't come to you, even for Indian ship owners, legal insurance we cover, because my boys don't trust Indians. And for me, it was just a matter of principle. And I had to go the English way, not simply get angry and shout, kept a courtesy. And I said, this is unlawful, legal. I went to the Prime Minister's office and we took it on. And it shows how it was now. And after that, the Lord Chief Justice assured me that the judiciary will take steps for diversification. Diversify means racial equality.
Right.
But things have changed all over now, all around now. And then came Brexit, and with Brexit came a lot of Europeans, and now it's a completely different scene.
Truly.
But we must not forget that there is still a resentment, and there's likely to be a resentment among the English white people to suddenly find the country overtaken by people from colonies and now in charge. But it's a good thing. We have five or six cabinet ministers in the British government, which was unthinkable.
So coming back to your book, I always wondered, when did you decide that now is the right time to pen my story? Because in your introduction, you have written that a lawyer never retires, and surely there are many interesting chapters still ahead of you. So how did you decide that now is perhaps the right time to tell my story?
I thought our firm became very well known after we won the Bank Malat case for Iran against the British government. And we made a claim of 1.6 billion against the UK government, and we won in the Supreme Court. And this case came to me after Bank Malat had lost in the High Court and Court of Appeal with a very large firm, Stephenson Harwood, and we had probably advised them that there's no chance in the Supreme Court. We took it over, and the way we handled it before 9 judges, and we won 5-4. And then we had a settlement. That was a time when I really thought that I should now, as a historical record, spend what I said. And before that, we had not succeeded, but we had advised the Russian government, and they lost the arbitration award of $50 billion in the UCOS case. They had come to me on what to do, because the other firms said you can't challenge the arbitration award. And I gave them a big argument. I appointed a lawyer in Holland, and they won. And I think this is the time to and we became recognized in the markets. I think I should write a story, not as out of vanity, but to sort of make young people realize that everything is open to them. Right. Sorry, next thing.
Yes, sir. Another thing I've always wondered about people who write autobiographies and memoirs. How do you recollect all the information from your life with such precise detail? Did you keep diaries when you were growing up? Otherwise, how were you able to recall all of these details from your own childhood?
I had kept some important letters and papers, like, for example, the letter from Tony Blair, letter from John Major, the Prime Minister, pictures of the Dalai Lama, and I kept them, but I had no intentions of writing a book, so therefore I never took pictures also, I found them, I wrote them, but I had no intention. But just instinctively, I thought that I would share my experience with the people. Also because I wanted the British people to recognize that Indians are capable of achieving and succeeding. And that is very important, because then that recognition must come generally by example, and not by saying that I am as good as you are. And that's a better way to do it than to say I'm equal like you.
Indeed. So, sir, now I'll quickly move on to the final set of questions that I have. And these are
Yeah.
questions from a student perspective.
Can I tell
So,
you one other thing?
please do.
It's also
Please do.
what you require is good luck. And I think prayers, because when I was a young kid in Bombay, from the age of 7 or 8, I became a vegetarian. I eat fish, but I stopped eating chicken and meat and other things. And I used to go to the Parsiya Gallery every morning at the Artist Gallery in Bombay before school. And throughout my life, prayers has been an important sort of obligation, not obligation, but important event for me to pray. And a lot of my inspiration comes, what I call it, the grace of God,
I see.
and that must be recognized.
I totally agree with that, sir. So, moving on to the next question. As a lawyer who has set up a law firm in a foreign country, what is your opinion on India allowing entry to foreign law firms? Do you think it's high time we do that?
I think it's very important for a younger generation of Indian lawyers, because at the moment what has happened is that there are 8 or 10 Indian law firms who are monopolizing quality work. And in fact, it is they who are opposing the entry of foreign lawyers. If the foreign law firm comes into India, it'll give an opportunity for young Indians. See, one of the problems with India, I can say as a fellow Indian, although I'm a British citizen now, that we don't have a merits culture. We have a patronage culture in India. And that patronage culture came from our colonial heritage. There are 4,500 white people were ruling 425 million Indians. And therefore, they had to keep the pure grandeur high and mighty and patronage culture. If you're good to them, or you know your father, or somebody knows them, then you get it. That's how they control the population. After independence, instead of being completely independent ourselves, we fell into that. The Indians who took that position became the Brown Sahibs. So it is this 8 or 10 Indian firms who are monopolizing the quality work. And I'm sure that they are the ones who are behind stopping the foreign firms are coming into London, coming into India. I think we should welcome them.
I see. And so, sir,
An
now
Indian mind is equal to any other mind, but give the young Indian an opportunity.
wonderful. I totally agree with that. So, sir, now these are the last two questions I have.
You do it.
So, if an Indian law student at this point in time is thinking of making a career in law in England, what would your advice be to him or her?
Of course, if he has the competence to do so, he must try. But all in England is very much on merits. And there is no sort of patronage or who knows who. Even all those Indian students who asked me to, I said, you must apply. There are interviews. If you're selected, fine. I can't do anything. And I'll give you an example. I have started a scholarship in Oxford University, Somerville College, my father's name, called Zaiwalla Scholarship for one Indian student for LLM. And when it was announced, I had lots of calls from fathers saying, please, my son has applied or my daughter has applied. And I said, look, if I interfere, even if your son is on merits going to get it, he'll be disqualified. And that is the whole culture here compared to Indian culture. It is purely on merits. So of course, if he's good, he must try, but he must try on his own. No using pulls, and the strings don't work in England.
I understand that. And so, sir, this is the final question. This is a question that I ask all the guests on my podcast.
I want to add a point. How I started. I'm also, when I was saying a prayers, you know, I don't know whether you know, but Tony Blair worked with my firm.
Yeah.
And the only time his name appears in the law report is instructed by Zaiwalla and Company for President of India. The case called La Pintara, which went to the House of Lords. And so I was lucky enough also, because being the only brown skin has its own attraction. People wanted to know me.
Yeah. In fact, the story with Tony Blair is quite interesting. So would you care to tell us that, how he worked with you? And
yeah, I first met Tony on a flight, British Airways. I was traveling first class. I have a Dubai client called Global Shipping of Dubai, and they had a very big arbitration in London, which was shifted to New Orleans. And I got the Dubai client, Global Shipping, I think on the recommendation of a Parsi doctor, Farooq Udwaria was my relation. And the person in charge was Mike Minwal, another Parsi. So he sort of gave me the work. And we had a 2 weeks arbitration concerning the Jumeirah Beach resort that time being built, shipping case. And on the flight was Tony Blair with Derry Irwin and his team. And I was the only from my side of the first class. So we got to know each other. We had a 2 weeks arbitration in New Orleans in America. And there he was just become a barrister, and he said he would like to work with us. And I was lucky because those days I was acting for Indian government for shipping cases. And India had many, many London maritime arbitration. And that was really the one which gave me the break, to give me the confidence after the High Commissioner appointed me as the Indian government lawyer. And so I instructed him on a very difficult case. And then he was totally unprepared. And there were some issues. So I had to sack him. And in 2004, David Lepard, deputy editor of Sunday Times, wanted to write a story that if he had pleased me, he would have remained at the bar and not joined politics, and the world would have been saved the Iraq War.
Wow.
I sent this to Tony and his wife Sherry. He said, "No, you just stay quiet. They're good people."
Yeah.
So that's also, luck also makes a lot of power, and luck comes with good heart. And the most important thing is honesty and pure, kind, and radiant heart. I believe in that. Honesty and courtesy, and you can achieve anything. And
Wonderful.
no ego. No ego.
Truly. So, sir, this is
Now your last question.
Yes. The last question is something that I ask all my guests. What kind of books do you enjoy reading, sir? And if you have any recommendations for us?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to enjoy books of biographies of great minds, like Winston Churchill. I read Napoleon. I even read about Hitler's biography. Gandhiji, Louis Fisher's book on Gandhiji is a fascinating book. I found Gandhiji I would name him as a man of the last century, one of the men of the last century. Inspiring book. The other book which I read at an early age was Gita. Every day I used to read a chapter, even though I'm a Parsi. Yeah. And the most important other is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a very good book to read, because you must know how to get along with people. Not everybody are going to like you, and some will dislike you, but you must know how to handle them. And I have a policy that if I hear somebody speaking bad about me, I would first check whether he knows me. If he knows me, then I have to see whether what he's saying is true, and I must improve. If he doesn't know me and I've never met him, I would just ignore it.
Makes sense. And I think, sir, with this, we can come to an end of this conversation. I would like to thank you once again for joining me.
It's an honor to be with you on Letter of the Law. God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.
Goodbye.